Welcome to This Feels Familiar. I'm your host, Minaa B. I'm a therapist, author, and creator of the Siblinghood Theory, and this show explores the themes of belonging, conflict, and the relational patterns shaping your life. So let's dive in. I'm really excited about this episode because we are going to be deconstructing a very popular term, which is the concept that if you love yourself, you wouldn't make bad decisions. And that's actually not true. There are messages everywhere where people are telling us that once you love yourself, you'd stop choosing the wrong people. That self love would be the protective shield that kept toxic people out of your life. And so you probably went and did the work. You went to therapy, you set boundaries with your family, you learned to love yourself. You read the books, you did the journaling, you practiced affirmations. You literally did everything society tells you to do in order to cultivate self love. And then you met someone. And despite all that work, despite all of that growth, you chose the emotionally available person, the one who reminded you of old wounds, the one your friends could see wasn't good for you, but you couldn't. Or maybe you could see it, but you chose them anyway. And now you're here sitting and thinking to yourself, did I not love myself enough? Did I fail? Did all that work that I did to heal mean nothing? Well, here's what I want you to understand. Loving yourself doesn't automatically stop you from choosing the wrong person because relationship choices aren't just about self worth, they're about attraction, familiarity, and those unconscious patterns that run deep and inform our decision making. So, before we get deeper into this episode, I would love for you to take a moment to press that subscribe button so that you do not miss an episode. And make sure you are leaving a 5-star rating if you do enjoy this episode at the very end. Now, let's start by naming what's wrong with the advice you've been given. The self love industry has sold us the idea that if you just work on yourself enough, you'll automatically make good relationship choices. That self worth acts like a filter, screening out anyone who isn't good for you. You might also hear the message that loving yourself means you'll only be attracted to healthy people who treat you well. But that's not how things work. And when it doesn't work that way for you, you end up blaming yourself, you internalize the failure. You might even think, I must not love myself enough. I must still be broken. I must need to do more work. And this is a critical thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand that I really want to unpack today. You can have incredible self esteem and still be drawn to people who aren't good for you. You can know your worth and still choose someone who doesn't see your worth. You can love yourself deeply and still end up in a relationship that hurts you. Because relationship choices aren't just about how you feel about yourself, they're about unconscious patterns, about what feels familiar, and about the blueprints you carry from your earliest relationships. They're also about external pressure, the societal and economic forces pushing you to couple up, regardless of whether the person is actually right for you. So, is self love important? Yes, it does matter, but it is not a shield. And it's not the only thing that determines who you're attracted to or who you choose. So, I'm sure you're thinking, so if it's not just self love, what is it? What makes you choose someone who isn't good for you, even when you know better? The answer is you're drawn to what feels familiar, not what's objectively healthy. And familiar doesn't mean good, it just means it's what you know. Your brain is wired to seek patterns it recognizes. So when you meet someone who reminds you, consciously or unconsciously, of early relational dynamics, your nervous system might light up, hence the sense of butterflies sometimes in your stomach. Not because they're right for you, but because they feel familiar, feel safe, even when it's actually the opposite. When your brain receives data that is familiar, it assumes it's safe because it's data you lived through before. And research in neuroscience shows that the brain prioritizes predictability over novelty, even when that predictability involves pain or dysfunction. Your brain would rather navigate a painful dynamic it knows than risk the uncertainty of something new. So it's not about logic, it's literally about survival. Your nervous system is saying, I know how to survive this pattern. I've done it before, and I've been here before. Which is why when we meet people who have certain dysfunctional traits, if they mirror the dysfunctional traits your mother has, your father has, your sister, your brother, your uncle, you've learned how to survive those traits. So you might say, I can do this again. And this is where the siblinghood theory comes in, which is a framework that I created that examines how sibling and peer relationships shape the way we navigate belonging, conflict, and connection throughout our lives. And those early horizontal relationships, which are the ones with siblings, childhood friends, our peers, they create blueprints that show up in your romantic choices. So if you grew up in a family where love was conditional, where you had to perform or achieve to get attention, you might be drawn to partners who make you work for their affection. Not because you don't love yourself, but because that dynamic feels like home. Again, it feels familiar. If conflict in your early peer relationships always led to rupture, you might be attracted to people who are conflict avoidant. Someone who stonewalls or withdraws feels familiar because that's the pattern you know. So even if you consciously want someone who can communicate, your nervous system might pull you toward what it recognizes. So if you learned early on that your needs didn't matter, that you had to suppress yourself to maintain belonging, you might choose partners who center themselves, not because you think you deserve less, but because putting someone else first feels like the only way to stay connected. These aren't conscious choices. You're not sitting here thinking, I want someone who's emotionally unavailable. I want someone who's going to treat me very poorly. You're experiencing attraction based on patterns that were set probably years ago, and patterns that have nothing to do with how much you love yourself now. But it's not just internal patterns driving your choices, there's also external pressure too. And this pressure affects your relationship decisions in ways that have nothing to do with self love. Did you know that there is a single tax? And I'm not talking about a metaphor. I'm talking about the actual financial cost of being unpartnered in a system designed for two. Research shows that single people can pay significantly more over their lifetime compared to married couples. The US tax code favors married couples filing jointly with lower tax rates and higher standard deductions. Housing costs don't change based on how many people are living there. So if you're single, you're covering the full cost while your couple's friends split it. Health insurance, utilities, groceries, memberships, everything costs more when you're footing the bill alone. But the cost isn't just financial. There's a social and emotional cost too. You're the only single person at the dinner party, maybe at every family gathering. Everyone is questioning you about your relationships and your singleness, and they're wondering, when are you going to finally meet somebody? So much of social life is structured around partnership, and being unpartnered means constantly navigating that. And here's how this connects to your relationship choices. All of that pressure, the financial cost, the social cost, the emotional cost, it creates urgency. It even creates scarcity thinking. It can make you feel like you need to find someone, like time is running out, like being alone isn't sustainable. So when someone shows interest in you, even if they're not quite right, there's pressure to make it work. So sometimes that pressure will make you overlook the red flags. You start to convince yourself the relationship is good enough because the alternative, being single, comes with real costs. And no amount of self love makes those costs disappear. So you can love yourself and still feel the weight of that pressure. You can know your worth and still make a choice based on fear of being alone, the fear of financial burdens, the fear of being left behind while everyone else peers off. And this isn't about you failing, it's about you existing in a system that penalizes singleness and pushes people toward relationships, whether those relationships are healthy or not. So now that we understand what's actually driving those choices, let's reframe what's happening. First, choosing the wrong person doesn't mean you failed at self love. It doesn't mean you didn't do enough work or that you're still broken. Sometimes it literally just means you're human. It means your nervous system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's seeking familiarity and predictability, even when that familiarity isn't healthy. Self love is important. It helps you recognize your worth, set boundaries, and leave situations that aren't serving you. But self love alone can't override unconscious patterns that were formed in childhood. It can't erase the blueprints you carry from your earliest relationships, and it can't eliminate the very real external pressure to couple up. What you're experiencing isn't a personal failure, it's a collision between what you consciously want and what your nervous system has been trained to recognize as safe. Once you see the pattern, you can start to interrupt it. You can recognize when you're being pulled towards someone because they mirror a early dynamic, not because they're actually good for you. You can notice when external pressure is making you settle instead of waiting for what you actually want. So, this is about bringing awareness to the internal and the external that influences our decision making. And that awareness is what creates the possibility for a different choice next time. Now, quick pause. If this conversation is helping you see your own patterns more clearly, please subscribe to the show and leave a review. It helps more people find these episodes. And if you know someone who keeps choosing the wrong person despite doing all the work, please also share this episode with them. Sometimes just knowing it's not about self love makes all the difference. So, if loving yourself isn't enough, what do you actually do? How do you start making choices that serve you instead of repeating the same pattern? Well, let me walk you through some strategies. First, slow down the attraction. When you feel intense chemistry with someone right away, I need you to pause and ask yourself this. Does this feel exciting because they're right for me, or does this feel exciting because it's familiar? Intense early attraction can be a sign that your nervous system recognizes something, and what it recognizes isn't always healthy. So give yourself time to assess whether this person is actually good for you or if they're just activating an old pattern. The next thing you need to do is to get curious about what chemistry means to you. For a lot of people, chemistry means familiarity. It literally just simply means I want to date someone who reminds me of someone that I've been with before, even though that person was not good for me. It means someone who triggers the same dynamics they grew up navigating. And it means that you might be comfortable with a particular pattern being at play, even if you know that pattern isn't good for you. So if your version of chemistry is someone who's hard to read, who keeps you guessing, who makes you work for their attention, that is information. You might be confusing anxiety for attraction. So understand that real compatibility often feels calmer, steadier, less like a roller coaster. And if that feels boring to you, that is also worth exploring. The next thing you need to do is notice the red flags and actually pay attention to them. If you notice that your friends are seeing something you're not seeing, take that as data. If your therapist is seeing something and you're not seeing it, also take that as data. You probably see them too, and it's possible that you're dismissing them. You're telling yourself it's not that bad, or they'll change, or maybe they're just being too picky. Just stop doing that. Red flags are information and trust them. They're your conscious mind trying to override the unconscious pull. Listen to what your mind is saying, especially when you recognize this thing does feel familiar. What do I need to do about that? How can I dive deeper into examining what that is? The next thing is bring in external perspectives. Talk to people you trust, your friends, a therapist, someone who knows your patterns and will be honest with you. Ask them what they see. Ask them if this person reminds them of anyone from your past. Sometimes the pattern is invisible to you because you're in it, but it's obvious to the people on the outside. Another thing I want you to do is to examine the external pressures around you. Ask yourself, am I choosing this person because I genuinely want to be with them? Or is it because I'm just tired of being single? Because being alone feels too expensive, too isolating, too hard. And there's no shame in acknowledging that pressure. But you need to be honest about whether it's driving your decision. Because staying with the wrong person to avoid being single doesn't actually solve the problem, it just delays it. The next thing you need to do is work on those underlying patterns in therapy. There are times where we need additional help and support. So if you keep choosing the same type of person, that's not something meditation and affirmations may necessarily fix on its own. That's deep relational work. So, a good therapist can help you identify the blueprints you're carrying, where they came from, and how to start building new ones. This isn't about loving yourself more, it's about understanding the unconscious forces shaping your attraction and learning to interrupt them. The next thing is you need to give yourself permission to walk away. Even if you've already invested time, even if they're not that bad, but they are showing red flags, even if you're worried you won't find someone else, you can love yourself and still make a bad choice, but you can also love yourself enough to correct it. Walking away isn't a failure, it's you choosing your well being over familiarity. So, the key message of today's episode is for you to understand this. Loving yourself doesn't stop you from choosing the wrong person because relationship choices aren't just about self worth. They're about unconscious patterns, about what your nervous system recognizes as familiar, and about the very real external pressure to couple up. You can do all the work, go to therapy, set boundaries, create affirmations, and still be drawn to someone who isn't good for you. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. It means your brain is doing what brains do, seeking predictability, even when that predictability involves pain. The goal isn't to never make a bad choice. The goal is to bring awareness to the forces shaping your attraction so you can start to interrupt the pattern, to slow down enough to ask, is this person right for me or do they just feel familiar? To recognize when external pressure is making you settle instead of waiting for what you actually want. So, if this episode resonated with you, please rate and subscribe to the show. It helps more people find these conversations. Also, if you are looking for a therapist, my waitlist is finally open and I am taking on clients. So, if you live in New York State, head to the show notes so that you can book a 15-minute consultation with me to see if we're a good fit for working with each other. You can also subscribe to my newsletter, All the Hard Things on Substack, where I go deeper into these topics. And if you haven't yet, grab a copy of my book, Owning Our Struggles. If that familiar feeling of choosing the wrong person despite doing all the work is something you're navigating right now, here's what I want you to remember from today's episode. It's not about loving yourself more. It's about understanding the patterns pulling you toward what feels familiar instead of what's actually healthy. And once you see the pattern, you can start to change it. Until next time.